Oh, thank you all for tuning in to another edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl D. Lane, as always, where I get to talk about everything that I normally don't get to talk about, my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you guys can all find on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasting apps or platforms from. I just released the pod. I thought I was going to get it, release it early this morning, but I got it done around midnight/afternoon, like 6 o'clock. Guys, check that out. And again, you'll find it on all your podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, the whole deal there. Me and Scotty, we talk about tiers of NBA stars. We talk about who can be the best player on a championship team, who can be the second best player on a championship team, and who can be the third best player on a championship team. So if you guys are interested in that type of NBA content, check out the podcast. Also, by the way, I have it time-stamped as well. So if you want to hear the first tier or the second tier or the third tier, you guys can do that as well. And also, thank you to everybody tuning in via Twitter/Periscope, Facebook Live, and YouTube live stream. So here's what we got today. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about on the show. More Deshaun Watson news. He loses sponsors. QB/NFL news. Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, et cetera, et cetera. Kawhi Leonard reportedly is going to re-sign with the Los Angeles Clippers, and Draymond Green versus Megan Rapinoe of the U.S. soccer team. So first, let's start with this. Beats by Dre and Nike, they both end and suspend their endorsements, both respectively. Nike suspended their endorsement with Deshaun Watson. Beats by Dre ended their endorsement with Deshaun Watson, and also Reliant Energy announced that they will not be continuing its relationship with Deshaun Watson. Things are not looking good in the Deshaun Watson case. Last time I did this, I talked about how those women finally put their name to it. They finally attached their name to the situation that was going on, and it did not look good for Deshaun. How many women are coming out? It doesn't look good for Deshaun. So now that you're seeing that these industries, like, well, think about it. Nike's a $209 billion industry. Beats by Dre, $550 million. I don't even know what Reliant Energy is. These are big time companies, big time brands. These are people high in the social ladder. These are people who would know, right? I don't think it's hard for people at Nike to make a phone call, do some backworking channels, do a little bit of networking, and say, hey, did Deshaun do this? Or get a hold of these victims, right? These victims are starting to come forward more and more. You don't think Nike's doing a little bit of investigation? If we think the NFL is doing an investigation, you don't think these other companies are? Because their name, their brand is attached to Deshaun as a role model, someone they can sponsor and convey to the mass. So this does not look good for Deshaun Watson, not at all. And here's the question I want to ask everybody, and please comment. If this all turns out that all this is true, right, and this means Deshaun Watson's kind of a creep and has done some pretty effed up stuff, can he come back from this? Obviously, Ray Lewis was accused of killing somebody. He ended up going to jail for that. Was not convicted of that. Tiger Woods was a womanizer. I believe Michael Phelps got caught smoking weed, even though that's not nearly as bad as this stuff. And Ray Rice, kind of hit his wife, knocked out his wife. And I think we kind of all forgave all these guys in various different ways. Can Deshaun Watson be forgiven? Can he have a redemption story? I want people to comment if you're listening. Can Deshaun Watson redeem himself? I want to really know what people are thinking on that. So Carlos Dunlap, edge rusher for the Seattle Seahawks, assures people that Russell Wilson will be not getting traded and he will be staying with the Seahawks. This is what he said. He said, I asked him if he was coming back, and he said, I'm coming back because Carlos Dunlap just resigned, because Russell's coming back, and the rest of the team knows he's coming back. Now, first of all, I don't know if Carlos Dunlap got a for sure assurance from Russell Wilson, but let me remind you guys this. Once upon a time, Nick Saban was the coach of the Miami Dolphins. You know what he said? He said, I am not going to be the coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. He said that multiple times, every press conference. You want to know what ended up happening? 6 championships later at Alabama, he's the head coach at Alabama. Listen, people say a lot of things. Hey, Deshaun Watson, as we're bringing Deshaun Watson, I don't want to bring back up spilled milk and keep bearing on the guy, but Deshaun Watson said he has never treated a woman with nothing but the utmost respect. I think we can all tell at the very least in the Deshaun Watson situation, bro was being a little bit creepy. He was being a little bit creepy, right? So obviously Deshaun wasn't being totally truthful with that. He's like, oh, I've always treated women for respect. I just weirdly request for massage DMs on Instagram. So like, what the hell would Carlos Dunlap know? People say things all the time in this world. People change their mind. Nothing is set in stone. So I don't understand why Carlos Dunlap is saying it's like he's so sure Russell Wilson's not getting traded. To me, that is nothing but wishful thinking and really not the smart thing to say, because things are subject to change all the time in this world. Tom Brady. He talks about the Patriots in his time at New England. He talks about how he realized that there was another way to win after leaving the Patriots and going to the Bucs. And he appeared on Good Morning America, and he talked about it. And I just want to paraphrase here, basically what he said. He said, when you're in a place for 20 years, you think that there's only one way to do things. And I think that when you go in a different place, you realize, wow, there's another way to deal with people. There's another way to do things. And I'm just paraphrasing what he said. I think this is a direct shot at the Bill Belichick Patriot way. Obviously, the Patriot way has not been looking good lately. Tom Brady won a ring. He's up on the ring count with Belichick versus Brady. Brady's at 7. Belichick is at 6. And it's kind of, the whole Patriot way. You're robots. You never talk. You never be yourself. Also, Malcolm Butler suddenly didn't play for the Super Bowl. Remember that, guys? Malcolm Butler didn't play for the Super Bowl. And we don't know why. Like, that's kind of the Patriot way. You get traded. We get rid of you before we get rid of you, when we want to get rid of you. We don't pay you. And it's kind of like a direct shot at Bill Belichick in the Patriot way. And it's like, there's a different way to do things. There's the fun way to do things. Instead of living in the cold Foxborough, we're going to be cold and secretive. We're going to cuss and swear with Bruce Arians. Like, it's going to be different. So I just think that's a direct shot at the Patriot way. And I do want to say this. I do think it's always good to leave a new place. There's a saying, when you're the best person in a room, you need to find a new room. I think sometimes you need growth. And Tom Brady, for most of his adult life, has lived in Foxborough, Massachusetts. I think it helps him grow as a man, grow as a person, to live somewhere else regularly in Tampa Bay. Next up, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and Devontae Smith are among the first players to accept 2021 NFL Draft invites. So the big story here that I want to focus on is this. Trey Lance is getting invited. I haven't finished my QB board yet. And that will be coming out in a couple weeks, by the way. And by the way, on the description below, it's my top 15 interior defensive linemen if you guys want to check that out. But Trey Lance is 7th on my list of top QBs right now. He's 7th. I'm going to watch a little bit more. Probably he might end up being in the top 5. I don't know. But right now, he could be 7 to, I think, 4 to 5. That's where he is right now, where I'm thinking from what I've seen. But I want to delve obviously more on the quarterbacks. It's crazy. A dude from North Dakota State who did not play high-level major Division I college football, it looks like he's going to be a top pick. And I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. Because I'll tell you this, the NFL, they don't invite dudes to go to the draft for nothing. They go because they hear, right, that there's rumors swirling. There's leaks. So I think this is kind of all but assures people like Mac Jones, right? Mac Jones, another guy that wasn't being talked about at first. It looks like and Adam Schefter, the great Adam Schefter, reported this yesterday. Mac Jones is going 3rd overall in the NFL draft. Trey Lance, people have talked about Trey Lance to Atlanta at 4. That's a thing. You could have Trevor at 1, Zach Wilson at 2, Mac Jones at 3, and Trey Lance at 4. These quarterbacks are going high off the board. So to me, what this is thinking is, I'm not the biggest fan of Trey Lance, but the NFL is a big fan of Trey Lance, and the team is going to fall in love with him. They're going to fall in love with the arm strength and the athleticism. So I think this shows Trey Lance is going to be overdrafted. Kawhi Leonard, as we go to basketball, it has been reported by The Athletic. And by the way, shout out to The Athletic. They've been doing a lot of good NBA reporting. That Kawhi Leonard in all likelihood will re-sign with the Los Angeles Clippers unless something unexpected happens. And when I hear that in the report, I'm thinking they get swept in the first round. And something crazy happens, or Ty Lue smacks Kawhi Leonard, or Steve Ballmer says something crazy to Kawhi Leonard. I mean, we know Kawhi Leonard can be a little bit fickle and get mad. I mean, what happened with the San Antonio Spurs? Obviously, also, he left Toronto high and dry, though he did get them a championship. I think this is good for the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard, he's likely going to resign. Paul George is already resigned. And I think this allows the Clippers to kind of rebuild their whole team and kind of keep building and building and building. Because when you're going to have your 2 top stars, right, your 2 guys, your 2 dogs, the 2 guys leading you, I think you're more likely to be able to build your team and focus on the win now instead of, okay, we need to collect assets for the future. Okay, next up and lastly, Megan Rapinoe and Draymond Green go at it. And they talk about the gender wage gap when it comes to sports. Megan Rapinoe has been very outspoken. She's also been very critical of former President Donald Trump. But she's talked about women getting equal pay in terms of sports. And what Draymond said is this, and I want to make sure I'm getting all this correctly when I say this. Draymond said female athletes aren't doing enough to close the pay gap between them and their male counterparts. Now, Megan Rapinoe basically called him out and said he's, he said you're an, she called him an asshole and basically said he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what she said. And I think the important thing to remember is when we talk about the gender wage gap, and obviously I don't want to get into that and the whole societal aspect of that. I'm just going to keep it to sports here. But what I do want to say is this. Men's sports are more popular than female sports, and that's why men make more money. And that's not necessarily easy to say, but that's just the fact. And I just want to read this to you. The most popular sports in America, right? The NFL, men play in the NFL. NBA, men. College football, men. You have the MLB, men. NHL, men. You have sports like boxing. Boxers we talk about. People don't talk about female boxers. People talk about Floyd Mayweather. They talked about Manny Pacquiao. They talked about Canelo Alvarez. Then if you go to MMA, and this is where we start getting into women, there's been women like Cyborg, Holly Holmes, Ronda Rousey. When Ronda Rousey was at her power, she was one of the, she was very profitable. People really cared about Ronda Rousey. She was beating the crap out of people. But, besides MMA, there really hasn't been a sport that I feel like has captivated people's attention in America. And also there's Serena Williams in tennis, right? But besides that, there's only been a couple women that have really been able to capitalize themselves and make a lot of money and be marketable. But besides that, if you even look at the WNBA, you know why the WNBA doesn't make as much money as the NBA? Like, people don't watch the WNBA. And, it's good basketball. A lot of those girls would have kicked the crap out of most guys, but, people don't watch. People don't watch. And we can get into a whole lot of reasons why people don't watch. I think it's an interesting conversation, but people don't watch. And that's why they don't get paid as much, particularly in sports. Like, there's not the money to give. Like, and I always say this, even if you don't want to compare it to men to women, think about this. Like, I love wrestling. You have John Carroll Wrestling right here, right? I love wrestling. The Olympic trials for wrestling just happened. And I don't talk a lot about on the show about wrestling because I assume people here don't care about wrestling. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But also, one of the best wrestlers in the world is Jordan Burroughs. He's been a multiple 5-time world champion, really good athlete. He will never make as much money as somebody like an Otto Porter Jr., who is a 8th man on a basketball roster. So the best wrestler in the world, the United States of America, who represents us for the Olympics, can't make half of what an 8th man on some NBA roster does. Like, you want to know why? Because people care about basketball. They don't care about wrestling. They don't care about wrestling. Like, that's why. Like, you can extend this to a lot of different things. There's a reason why the Olympic sport athletes don't make a lot of money. People don't care about them for the most part. I mean, there's the Michael Phelps, there's the Usain Bolt, there's always people that can market themselves, but that's just the way it is. Even if you think about soccer, most popular sport in the world, it's men's soccer. The reason why the U.S. women's team, they don't make as much, because the world does not care about women's soccer. The world cares about men's soccer. They care about Ronaldo. They care about Messi. They care about Mbappe. They care about Neymar. That's what they care about. It's like God in those countries. Like, they love them soccer. People think they love football. People think they love football in the United States of America. They love soccer in Europe and Africa and Australia and South America and all these other places around the world. So when you talk about the gender wage gap in sports, part of it is people don't watch them. People don't watch them. If people watch the WNBA as much as they do the NBA, they'd make more money. You want to know who the most talked about athletes are? In basketball, LeBron James, Kevin Durant. People aren't talking about Sue Bird. People aren't talking about Sue Bird. You don't hear any of these shows on ESPN. Do they talk about Sue Bird? No. Now, should they? That's another conversation, but they don't. People aren't buying these people's jerseys for the large part. I think you have to realize where the money is coming from and why the attention isn't there. So it's always deeper than everything should be equal. Unless in a perfect scenario, everything should be equal. But then you'd have to say every sport should get paid as much, right? You'd have to say that lacrosse players should get paid as much as football players. Why don't they? People don't watch lacrosse. People don't watch lacrosse. NHL, one of the 4 major sports in America. I think the highest paid player in the NHL makes $12 million a year. Freaking LeBron James makes 40. There are levels to this. It's how much people watch, how much people endorse your product, and that's why. And it's not really about gender. And there are women that have broken that barrier. Like I said, Ronda Rousey, Serena Williams, Holly Holmes, Cyborg. Even when you look at Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, a couple of the women on the U.S. team. But that just doesn't happen by and large. That's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. Share this on whichever platform you're listening to. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Also, like I said, check out the description below, my top 15 interior defensive linemen. And check out the podcast I did with Scotty. We did our tiers for who can be the best player on an NBA championship team, the second best player on an NBA championship team, and the third best player on an NBA championship team.